Look who showed up. Big cheers for stopping by my channel. If it's your first visit, don't forget to subscribe and share the joy. Tell me where you're tuning in from. Every comment lights me up. Time to start. My name is David Miller. I'm 45 years old, and I've been working in law enforcement for nearly 20 years. Up until about 3 months ago, I honestly believed I had everything a man could hope for. I was 18 years into a marriage with Caroline. We had 2 daughters I adored, Emily, 17, and Grace, 15. We lived in a peaceful neighborhood, the kind with trimmed hedges and a driveway wide enough for 2 cars. We even had a backyard where we used to host 4th of July barbecues. My life was built on 3 foundational pillars: order, devotion, and sacrifice. Every extra hour I stayed on the clock, every shift I pulled while they ate dinner without me, every birthday or holiday I missed, it was all done for one reason: to provide for them. I truly believed Caroline understood that. She used to give me a kiss goodbye before I headed out for overnight patrols, and always had fresh coffee waiting for me when I got home at sunrise. Emily and Grace used to beam with pride when they showed me their report cards, soccer medals, or school art projects. I'd tell myself missing their milestones was justified if it meant they never had to feel deprived. Our home wasn't luxurious, but it was honest. I'd managed to pay down half of the mortgage through sheer persistence, and every time I sent in a payment, it felt like a quiet personal victory. Caroline had complete freedom when it came to decorating. She picked soft, comforting colors for the walls, framed family photos lined every shelf, and she kept fresh flowers in vases she'd collected over the years. Even when I was working late, she kept the family machine running, managing the school schedules, doctor appointments, and teenage growing pains. I believed we were a team, each pulling our weight in our own way. About 4 months ago, Caroline began organizing what she called Girls' Days with Emily and Grace. She said it was about spending intentional time with them, just the 3 of them bonding. They'd go out shopping, catch a movie, or dine at restaurants that sounded a little upscale. At the dinner table, she'd stroke my hair and smile, saying things like, "They're growing up so quickly, David. I want to make memories while I still can, and how could I argue with that?" It sounded like something any loving mother would want. Every Saturday, they'd head out together. Caroline would always wear that sky blue sundress I gave her for her birthday. The girls started dressing a little more polished, too. They'd come back later in the day, arms full of shopping bags from stores I'd never heard of, sharing private jokes I wasn't part of. In the beginning, these outings were occasional, maybe once a month. Then they doubled in frequency. Before long, it felt like they were happening every other weekend. Caroline would talk about them like it was no big deal. "We found the cutest shop downtown," or "the girls begged me to try that new Asian-Mexican fusion place." Sometimes she'd show me a receipt, but the numbers never quite added up. A casual lunch shouldn't cost what those totals reflected. Then, one Tuesday evening, about 3 weeks ago, something happened that I didn't expect. I came home earlier than usual. My partner had to leave unexpectedly for a family emergency, and the captain didn't see the point in reassigning me mid-shift. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when I overheard Grace in the next room. "I know, Richard is so funny," she said quietly, giggling in that hushed way teens do when they're trying not to be overheard. "Mom said we could—" Her voice cut off abruptly when she noticed me. Her eyes locked with mine, and she froze in place, phone still to her ear, completely rigid. "Who's Richard?" I asked calmly, keeping my voice even. Before Grace could speak, Emily appeared like she'd been waiting off stage for a cue. "He's just some kid from school," she chimed in quickly. "Right, Grace? That guy from biology class?" Her answer came too fast, her voice too smooth. "I've spent enough years interrogating suspects to recognize a story that's been prepped ahead of time." Grace nodded far too eagerly and hung up the phone without saying goodbye. A second later, both of them rushed upstairs, suddenly very concerned about schoolwork that had to be done immediately. Later that night, I lay next to Caroline, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing while my mind spun in loops. I kept replaying the scene, Grace's slip, Emily's suspiciously perfect save, and how quickly they both retreated like they were fleeing a crime scene. These were my daughters. I'd always believed they were open and genuine, but now I'd caught them lying, and not just a spontaneous fib. This was coordinated, practiced. Something deep in me shifted that night. The shopping trips, the strange receipts, the sudden energy in the house I had chalked up to mother-daughter bonding, now it all felt like something else entirely. Caroline stirred in her sleep beside me, mumbling something incoherent, and I caught myself wondering who occupied her dreams. The following morning, as we sat around the table, she brought up another casual weekend plan. "There's a craft fair out in Riverside," she said, eyes fixed on the coffee she was pouring. "The girls have been wanting to go." I glanced over at Emily and Grace. They exchanged a fleeting look, too subtle for most to notice, but not me. Emily's mouth twitched, the beginning of a grin she quickly suppressed. Grace, meanwhile, was suddenly engrossed in her cereal like it held the answers to life. "Sounds like fun," I said, and I meant it. Because for the first time in nearly 20 years of marriage, my gut, honed by years on the force, was sending up red flags. The three people I trusted most were deceiving me, and I needed to understand why. Chapter 2: The Shadow of Doubt. The days that followed moved painfully slow, stretched thin with tension, like a cable about to snap. Every chat with my family felt loaded, each glance or remark an encrypted message in a puzzle I never asked to solve. I began to despise the man I was becoming, analyzing every inflection in Caroline's voice when she mentioned her errands, taking note of how quickly Emily dodged school-related topics, watching Grace's hands twitch nervously whenever I walked into the room. By Wednesday evening, I stepped across a boundary I never imagined I'd breach. While Caroline was showering, I searched her handbag. It was filled with the usual: lipstick, sanitizer, glasses, but tucked among them was a folded receipt from Bella's, a high-end restaurant nearly an hour away. The date lined up perfectly with the weekend they were supposedly shopping at the mall. 4 entrees, 4 drinks, 4 desserts, not 3, 4. My hands were shaking as I snapped a picture of it, then slipped the receipt back exactly where it had been. After 18 years of never prying into her personal things, I had just rifled through her purse like she was a suspect, and the case against her was mounting. The following day, I made an unplanned visit home during lunch. Caroline was on a call in our bedroom, door mostly closed. From the hallway, I heard her laugh, not a polite giggle, but a deep, genuine laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. I know," she said, with a fondness that twisted in my gut. "Saturday can't get here soon enough." A short silence followed. "No, he's completely in the dark." The girls are naturals at this. So smooth I backed away, quiet as a whisper, then made sure to announce myself loudly as I climbed the stairs again. When I entered the room, she had already ended the call and was calmly folding laundry. "Hi, honey," she greeted me with a quick peck on the cheek. "What are you doing home?" "Left my spare radio at home," I lied, as effortlessly as she had moments before. She tilted her head, casual as ever. "You okay?" "You look flushed." Then, without missing a beat, she gestured vaguely toward the TV. "Just finished a workout," she added. The screen was dark. The remote hadn't been touched in days. It was covered in dust. That night, I shattered yet another line I had sworn never to cross. I logged into our family cell plan. Within seconds, I found the number. Unfamiliar, no contact name, but unmistakably important. Over the past month, Caroline had exchanged more than 300 messages with it. Dozens of calls, some lasting over half an hour, all conveniently during my night shifts. But that wasn't the worst part. Emily and Grace had contacted the number too. I started mapping it out. Every so-called girls' day aligned perfectly with a surge in contact with that number. Morning messages as they headed out, lunchtime calls, late-night texts once I was asleep. The realization that hit hardest wasn't just that Caroline was lying. It was that the girls were active participants, not clueless bystanders. They were helping her. Helping her do what, exactly? Cover for an affair? The word echoed like broken glass in my throat. By Friday, I was parked in my cruiser, staring at the open notebook on my lap. It was filled with my observations, dates, timelines, inconsistencies, the receipt, the phone data, the conversations that now rang hollow and rehearsed. If this had been any other case, I'd have declared probable cause by now. But this wasn't a stranger. This was my wife, my daughters, my family. A knock on the window startled me. Rodriguez stood there, brow furrowed with concern. "Miller," he said, voice low. "You all right? You've been sitting here 20 minutes. "Yeah," I said, closing the notebook with a snap. "Just got a lot on my mind." "That domestic we handled earlier?" he asked, nudging gently. "Something like that," I murmured. That night, dinner felt like serving time in slow motion. Caroline had cooked my favorite, pot roast with those little buttery potatoes I always asked for on my birthday. The girls talked easily about school, their friends, the weekend ahead. It all sounded so normal. But now I could hear the absences, the deliberate detours around certain subjects. Everything they said seemed rehearsed to keep me from asking the wrong questions. "You're quiet tonight, Dad," Emily said, watching me. For a heartbeat, her expression was one of true concern, not staged, not forced, like she actually cared. "Just tired," I said with a shrug. "That craft fair you mentioned. What time are you all heading out?" Caroline and Grace both shifted toward Emily at the same time. It was barely perceptible, a flicker most would miss. But I wasn't missing anything anymore. "Probably around 11, Caroline answered quickly, as though she'd practiced it. "We want to get there before the crowd does." "Riverside's a nice place," I said, sawing through the roast. "Haven't been out that way in a while." "You should come with us sometime," Grace offered, then immediately looked like she regretted saying it. "Maybe I will," I said, watching the discomfort ripple through all three of them like a chill draft under a locked door. When the meal was done, I stayed behind to help with the dishes, something I rarely did. But I needed to stay close, to watch her. Caroline hummed softly as she rinsed the plates and handed them to me for drying. For a brief moment, it almost felt like old times. Then her phone vibrated on the counter. She glanced at the screen, smiled just a little, then placed it face down without comment. "Who was that?" I asked casually. "Just Mom," she replied without hesitation. "Asking about dinner on Sunday." Her mother had been dead for 3 years. I finished the last plate, wiped my hands, and leaned over to kiss her forehead. She froze, only for a second, then pulled away and slipped into the living room to watch something on TV. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. My mind was already somewhere else. Tomorrow I'd tail them. Tomorrow I'd stop guessing. Tomorrow I'd learn whether I was chasing shadows, or whether the 3 people I'd built my life around had been hiding something all along. Whatever truth lay ahead, it would come to light. And once it did, there would be no going back. Chapter 3. The Moment of Truth. Saturday morning broke thick and gray, with sticky air that clung to your skin and made tempers short. I was up by 6, same as always, and lay in bed watching Caroline sleep. In the low, colorless light, she looked so much like the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Her familiar curves, the gentle laugh lines we'd earned together, and that tiny scar on her chin from when she tripped during our 3rd date. I'd watched her wake up like this hundreds of times, filled with quiet gratitude that she was still beside me. She stirred, opened her eyes, and smiled. But in the next second, something flickered across her face, something I couldn't quite read. Nerves? Guilt? Anticipation? "Morning," she yawned, stretching. "Morning," I replied. "Excited for the big day at the craft fair?" "Should be nice," she said, swinging her legs out of bed and heading to the bathroom. "You working today?" she asked from the hallway. "Just some reports to catch up on," I answered. "I'll be at it most of the day." "We'll miss you," she said sweetly, before the bathroom door clicked shut. We. That word hit differently now. It meant something else. something I wasn't supposed to understand. I went through my morning routine just like always, pressed my uniform, buffed my badge, checked and rechecked my equipment. I kissed Caroline goodbye, called out a cheerful, "See you later" to the girls, and walked out the door at 9:30. But I didn't go to the precinct. Instead, I drove 3 blocks away, parked the unmarked car, and waited. At 10:45, I spotted them loading into her SUV. Caroline wore a yellow sundress I didn't recognize. When I kissed her earlier, I'd caught a scent I couldn't place, floral and expensive. The girls were dressed too nicely for a craft fair. Emily had on those designer jeans Caroline swore she found on clearance. Grace was wearing a soft, high-end sweater, cashmere from the look of it. I tailed them from a safe distance. The car blended in well enough with the Saturday traffic. Just another driver running errands. They took Route 9 toward Riverside, and for a few minutes, I tried to believe the story. Maybe they really were going to that craft fair. Maybe I'd let paranoia take the wheel. Maybe I was just a tired cop seeing patterns where none existed. Then Caroline drove right past the exit to Riverside and kept going. Another 15 minutes down the road, she steered into a neighborhood I knew from patrol, a neighborhood where there were no craft fairs. And no reason for her to be. The avenue was lined with mature trees and elegant homes, each property boasting perfectly sculpted hedges, the kind of quiet affluence that didn't need to boast, only whisper its superiority. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel as I watched her drive with the ease of someone returning to a familiar place. She didn't hesitate at turns, didn't check directions. She knew exactly where she was going. When she pulled into the driveway of a flawless colonial-style house, the kind you'd expect to find in a glossy real estate brochure, my chest tightened. This wasn't a public space, not a store, not a restaurant. It was clearly someone's residence. I parked several houses down the block, slipping behind a contractor's truck to keep a low profile, and watched. Caroline didn't knock. She didn't pause. She used a key and let herself in. My wife had access to another man's home, and our daughters followed her inside like it was nothing new, like this was their routine. I remained in the car, frozen, maybe 5 minutes, maybe more, before the years of tactical training kicked in. I stepped out and approached the house not as a husband, but as a seasoned officer responding to a potential incident. Calm, careful, alert. From the sidewalk, I could see portions of the interior through the front windows. Thin curtains veiled most of it, but not everything. The living room came into partial view, just enough to witness something that would gut me from the inside out. Caroline stood wrapped in a man's arms, someone tall, early 40s, exuding quiet wealth in the way he moved, dressed, carried himself. The kiss they shared wasn't new. It was familiar, affectionate, fluent. His hands gripped her waist like they'd done it 100 times. Her fingers curled in his hair like they knew the texture well. My wife, the woman I had built a life with, kissing another man like I was already erased. But what truly devastated me wasn't her. It was what my daughters were doing. Emily reclined on a cream-colored sofa, scrolling through her phone without a care in the world. Grace was curled up in an armchair, reading a book and smiling faintly at something the man said when he and Caroline paused their embrace. There was no tension, no awkwardness, no secrecy in their body language. They were comfortable, settled, like this was home. Then he walked over and gently tousled Grace's hair. She grinned at him. Emily leaned in to share something on her phone, and he chuckled in response. A soft, relaxed laugh, like this scene belonged to him. Caroline handed him a mug of coffee, and it hit me. He had a favorite mug. He had a routine. This wasn't casual. This was established, lived in, ongoing. I stood outside, peering in at the people I loved, now part of a world I was clearly excluded from. And what rose inside me wasn't a wildfire of rage. It was something colder, sharper. Not the chaos of fury, but the precision of betrayal measured and accounted for. While I worked double shifts to fund Emily's college ambitions, She was helping Caroline maintain a charade. While I missed family dinners to cover Grace's dance expenses, she was laughing in another man's presence. I had drained myself dry for them, and they had quietly replaced me without a word. Caroline threw her head back and laughed, and I caught a glimmer in her ears, diamond studs I had given her on our 15th anniversary. She wore my gift while embracing him. She brought our children into the deception, made them silent accomplices. The man slid his hand to the small of her back, possessive, certain. She leaned closer. The girls continued their conversation, unfazed, as if this wasn't betrayal, as if I didn't exist, as if nearly 2 decades of marriage had been little more than filler between visits to this house. I turned from the window. I didn't need more evidence. I didn't need another second of this cruelty. My decision had already been made. I walked toward the door, my steps deliberate, slow, final. The weight of my service weapon at my hip, the scent of clipped grass in the breeze, a lawnmower humming somewhere down the street. Every detail burned into memory, sharp as glass, the moment before everything broke. I didn't knock politely. I hit the door with the flat of my palm, a knock that said this wasn't a request, it was a reckoning. The voices inside stopped, then came footsteps, calm, confident, unaware. He didn't know what waited for him on the other side. The door opened, and there we stood, face to face. The man who built this life, and the one who took it. The one who provided, and the one who leached. The betrayed, and the uninvited intruder. Recognition hit him instantly. His skin lost all color as his eyes took in the uniform, the badge, and the expression I wore. An expression that didn't ask for explanations. An expression that spelled judgment. She stepped into view behind him, Caroline, her gaze locking onto mine. In that brief second, 18 years of marriage crumbled like brittle paper. Her mouth opened, maybe to spin a story, maybe to beg, maybe to deny. But I spoke first, voice firm, composed. Caroline, girls, over here, now. Chapter 4, Judgment Day. David, please, I can explain, she started, her voice laced with panic. 18 years, I cut in, my tone cold as I walked through the doorway without hesitation. Richard, that was the name I'd heard her use, backed away slowly. At least he had the decency to look scared. 18 years of marriage, and this is what you hand me. Emily and Grace stood rigid in the hall, pale and shaking. Good. Let the truth weigh heavy. It's not what it seems, Caroline stammered, her desperation leaking through. I let out a dry, bitter laugh, a sound with no humor in it. Everyone flinched at the sound. Not what it seems, I echoed. You carry a key to his house. Our daughters are lounging around like it's home, and you were kissing him, wearing the same earrings I gave you for our anniversary. I turned to the man standing between us. How long has this been going on? I asked. He tried to speak, but no words came. His eyes darted to Caroline, looking for guidance. I said, how long? I barked. The walls shook with my voice. 6 months, Caroline murmured. 6 months, half a year, 180 days spent feeding me lies. And the two of you? I turned my attention to the girls. How long have you known? Grace broke into sobs. Emily stiffened, jaw clenched. 4 months, she admitted. My mind calculated the timeline instantly. 2 months of secrecy between Caroline and him. Then she brought the girls into the betrayal. She turned our daughters into willing participants. Dad, listen, Emily began. Mom wasn't happy. Unhappy? I repeated, stepping toward Richard. He pressed his back against the wall. So instead of talking to me or getting help or even ending it the right way, she cheats? And drags my children into the mess to help keep it hidden? You were never here, Caroline shouted, her voice gaining strength. Always working, always tired. Working for this family, I shouted, the dam finally breaking. Every holiday I missed, every shift I picked up, every hour of overtime, I did it all for you, for them, to keep this family whole. That was when Richard spoke up, his mistake. Maybe we should try to calm... I didn't let him finish. My hand grabbed the front of his designer shirt and I slammed him into the wall. "You think you can tell me to calm down?" I hissed. "You're sleeping with my wife, playing daddy to my daughters, and now you want to keep things civil?" "David, stop!" Caroline screamed. But the line had already been crossed. My fist struck his face, the years of police training offering no space for hesitation. I heard the cartilage in his nose collapse, blood erupting like a faucet. He tried to block the blows, but I had speed, strength, and fury. I hit him again and again, each strike aimed with surgical precision, side of the head, solar plexus, lower back. He dropped to the floor, groaning and bloodied. I grabbed his hair and pulled his head up. "You thought you could take what I built?" I whispered with icy rage. "You thought there'd be no cost?" Dragging him by the scalp, I hauled his broken body past Caroline, still shrieking, and the girls, frozen in terror. I yanked open the door and flung him onto his pristine lawn like discarded trash. Neighbors began to appear, drawn by the noise. Good, let them see it all. Richard tried crawling away. I followed, planted a boot in his ribs. I felt something give. He screamed and curled up, sobbing like a child. I towered over him. "Stay away from my family," I declared for all to hear. "If I ever see you near them again, today will feel like kindness." I caught the sound of someone calling the police. I heard the words, "officer," "domestic," and nearly laughed. I was the police. I knew exactly how this would be written up. Turning back toward the house, I saw them, my so-called family, standing on the edge of the lawn. Caroline was inconsolable. The girls clung to each other like they were shipwrecked. The neighbors just watched in stunned silence. Middle-class spectators to a soap opera turned real. "You," I said to Caroline, pointing at her. My voice was as hard as steel. "This is over. The marriage is dead." She choked on a sob. "You remember the prenup you signed?" I added. "That means you leave with nothing. The house, mine. The bank accounts, also mine. If I give you anything at all, it won't be enough for more than a deposit on a rundown apartment," I said with flat finality. "Dad, don't do this," Grace pleaded, her sobs breaking her voice. I turned to face my daughters. Whatever they saw in my expression made them instinctively back away. "You both knew," I said, each word weighted with betrayal. 4 months of deception. Every night I walked through that door, every time I asked how your day was, every time I told you I loved you, you stared me in the face and lied. "We didn't want to hurt you," Emily said, her voice shaking. "No," I shot back. "You wanted to protect her. You stood with the one who betrayed me. You sided with him." I motioned to Richard, still groaning where he lay. "Instead of the man who gave everything so you'd never go without." "David, they're just children," Caroline said, trying to intercede. "They're old enough to understand what loyalty means," I answered coldly. "Old enough to choose sides. And they made their choice, just like you did." The sound of sirens grew louder, nearing the house. Time was running out. "You've got until morning," I said, my voice hard as stone. "Whatever you don't pack is going in the trash. The locks will be changed by noon." Caroline's voice cracked with panic. "Where are we supposed to go?" "That's your concern now," I replied. "Maybe Richard can put you up." I glanced over at him, his face battered and bloodied. Though it looks like hosting guests won't be high on his list for a while. 2 squad cars pulled up outside. I recognized the officers stepping out, Martinez and Samuel, both colleagues from my department. One glance inside, and they understood the scene. "Miller," Martinez said, voice cautious, eyes scanning the room. "He was sleeping with my wife," I stated, calm and composed. "I walked in on them, with my daughters present." I acted accordingly. Samuel knelt beside Richard, assessing him. "Sir, would you like to press charges?" Richard looked from me to the officers, then back to the blood on his hands. He said nothing, just shook his head. "Wise decision," I said under my breath. Turning to the officers, I added, "I'm taking my family home." "David, you can't just—" Caroline tried to object. "I can. And I am," I said, cutting her off without hesitation. Then I fixed my gaze on them, my wife, my daughters, the people who shattered my trust. Get in the car. Now, they hesitated. Get in the car, I shouted. Startled, they scrambled to Caroline's SUV. I watched them go, then turned back to Martinez. I'll file my report in the morning. He nodded. Brotherhood, unspoken. A silent understanding between men who've seen too much. Richard wasn't getting any justice, not tonight, just like I hadn't gotten any loyalty. I trailed behind the SUV as it veered slightly down the road. Caroline's hands must have been trembling on the wheel. Good. Let her feel a fraction of what I've endured. When we got back, I stood at the door while they slipped in, quiet and small. You've got until 9 a.m., I said, devoid of emotion. Take what you can carry. Leave the keys on the kitchen table. Daddy, please, Grace whispered one final plea. I'm not your father anymore, I replied, the words landing like a hammer. Your father is Richard now, or whoever your mother ends up with next. I turned my back on them and walked into my study, locking the door behind me. Their muffled crying and the sounds of rushed packing filtered through the walls. Caroline knocked more than once, begging me to open up. I didn't. I'd spent 18 years listening to her voice, and where had it gotten me? That night, I sat alone in my chair. My service weapon rested on the desk, not because I intended to use it, but as a reminder, a symbol that I still held the reins, my power, my home, my name. By the next morning, they were gone. Epilogue, what remains in the quiet. 3 months have passed since I torched the illusion of a happy family built inside a perfectly manicured suburban life. They say I destroyed everything. My captain used the word, the department therapist echoed it, even the lawyers mentioned it. But that's not the truth. I didn't destroy anything. I simply pulled the curtain back and revealed what had already been rotting beneath the surface. The house is silent now. I've taken down every photograph. Boxed up nearly 2 decades of fake memories I have no intention of revisiting. The walls are bare, but at least now they're honest. No staged family portraits, no snapshots of pretend joy. Caroline walked away with exactly what the prenup allowed, $10,000 and whatever personal items she could carry. Of course, she tried to fight it, lawyered up, claimed emotional distress, accused me of abandonment, manipulation, cruelty. But I had everything I needed, screenshots of texts, copies of hotel invoices, and most importantly, her own confession to a 6-month affair, spoken out loud, in front of witnesses. She lost, just like she lost me. The judge who presided over the proceedings, himself no stranger to failed marriages, showed Caroline no sympathy. She and the girls moved into a cramped 2-bedroom unit on the less desirable side of town. With their finances severely reduced, Emily had to withdraw from her private school. The tuition was out of reach. Grace stopped going to her dance lessons. To help make ends meet, both daughters took part-time jobs slinging fast food in the mall. Caroline managed to land a receptionist position at a local dental clinic, earning in 30 days what I used to clear in 7 with overtime. As for Richard, his bruises faded, but the damage stuck. His firm had a no-nonsense morality clause. The story of a bloodied executive assaulted outside his own house by an off-duty officer was more than just a scandal. It cost him his partnership. His wife filed for divorce and stripped him of everything their prenup didn't lock away. Last I heard, he vanished out of state. I'd call that a fitting end. In the early days, the girls tried reaching out. I ignored the texts, let the calls ring. Emily even sent a handwritten letter, several pages full of apologies, explanations, and desperate pleas. I stopped reading after the first line and tossed the whole thing into the fire. Grace left me a birthday voicemail, sobbing so hard her words were nearly incomprehensible. I deleted it without listening again. Now any contact happens strictly through my lawyer. I meet every court-mandated child support obligation, and nothing beyond that. The payments continue until the girls are legally adults. Caroline receives no financial support from me. I give exactly what the law demands, no more. No extra help with school fees, no coverage for doctor visits, no cell phone bills. They made their choice when they concealed their mother's affair. They can live with the consequences. Just last month, the department gave me a commendation for a narcotics bust I'd worked on before everything fell apart. I accepted the medal, said a few words, and felt utterly numb. Rodriguez mentioned that Caroline had called the station not long ago, supposedly asking about me. She was informed that any further contact would be considered harassment and dealt with accordingly. There's a new woman in my life, though it's nothing serious. We met at the gym. She doesn't pry, never asks about the bare walls or why there aren't any pictures of kids or family in my home. All she knows is that I'm divorced. Whether I'll ever tell her the full story is still up in the air. Trust is something I no longer give out lightly. Sometimes I find myself standing in Grace's old room. She left behind a few personal items, a small stuffed bear from her toddler years, a couple of books, and a band poster still pinned to the wall. I haven't moved a thing. It remains untouched, a quiet shrine to what was lost, a reminder of the price of betrayal and the permanence of the choices we make. I've heard that Emily's graduating soon. Supposedly, she didn't get into any of the colleges she applied to, lack of extracurriculars, not enough money for multiple applications. Maybe she'll enroll at the community college. Maybe she'll jump straight into work. It's not my concern anymore. Word is, Caroline bumped into Martinez's wife at the grocery store not long ago, broke down crying in the cereal aisle, said she missed me, admitted she'd made a terrible mistake, and claimed the girls were suffering. Martinez's wife, someone who knew firsthand what betrayal felt like, told her plainly, she made her bed, now she has to lie in it. Do I regret any of it? Not even slightly. Regret implies I'd choose differently if given the chance. I wouldn't. Every one of them had options. Caroline could have told me she was unhappy. She could have asked for counseling, filed for divorce like an adult. Instead, she chose deception. The girls could have told the truth. They could have stood by their father, the man who sacrificed everything for them. But they didn't. They chose silence. They chose her. Now, each of us lives with the outcome of our choices. I kept the house, kept my pension, and held on to my dignity. They kept each other, and the bitter knowledge that, when it mattered most, they sided with betrayal. When truth was on the line, they picked lies. When loyalty was tested, they failed. Some say I was too harsh, that I should have forgiven my daughters, that they were manipulated, just trying to hold things together. Those people don't understand. Family isn't defined by blood or legal ties. It's defined by loyalty, by who stands with you when it counts. They walked away from me, so I did the same. Now, the quiet that fills this house is honest. There are no more hushed voices slipping through cracks in the door, no secretive stares into phone screens, no scripted routines hiding double lives. It's just me, and the raw, unvarnished reality. And that's already more truth than I was given in the last 6 months, while the people I trusted the most were busy living a lie with someone else. I gave them everything I had, my energy, my loyalty, the prime years of my life, and a belief that we were something worth fighting for. What I got back was betrayal, neatly packaged in weekend getaways and rehearsed performances of family unity. When their facade crumbled, I gave them exactly what they had earned, absolutely nothing. Call it heartless if you want. I call it justice. From the moment they decided deception was easier than honesty, they drew their line in the sand. And like every decision, theirs came with consequences. They now bear the weight of their actions, and so do I. The difference? I rest easy at night. I don't carry guilt for the path I chose, but I do wonder, can they say the same?